Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at one of Bordeaux's less distinguished appellations. This is a wine from Montagne Saint Emilion. This is Chateau Teyssier and it's the 2018 vintage of that. Vines evidently have been cultivated in the Montagne Saint Emilion vineyards of Chateau Teyssier since the 15th century. Today the estate has somewhere in the region of 50 hectares of vines and the picturesque 18th century chateau. Now the vines are located in 3 parcels. The largest parcel, comprising about 35 hectares, lies between Montagne Saint Emilion and the neighbouring appellation of Puissegin-Saint-Emilion. They're on the highest point of the plateau there, at somewhere in the region of about 115 metres above sea level. There are another 10 hectares of vines located on a south-facing hillside, a sort of an amphitheatre of hills, and here quality is often some of their highest, not only because of the slope and the fact that the slope captures the sunlight, but also the fact that the limestone subsoils here provide excellent water regulation, so they hold on to water and only allow it back to the plant relatively slowly during the summer months. The final plot, about 6 hectares, is located in a place called Parcels, which is in the heart of Montagne Saint-Emilion. So in total, the chateau has about 20 hectares of its vines in Montagne Saint-Emilion, and the balance lies in Puissegin-Saint-Emilion. Soils here are predominantly clays with limestone subsoils, and these are soils that are very similar to some of the highly regarded soils in Saint-Emilion. So you get a combination of these iron-rich red clays, which provide richer, riper flavours in the wine, and the more limestone-based soils, which provide more elegance, freshness, length, balance. And all of these lie a few kilometres northeast of Saint-Emilion itself. Perhaps at this stage I should do some disambiguation because this is terribly confusing. There are a number of wines labelled as Chateau Teyssier in Bordeaux. Most prominently is a Saint-Emilion Grand Cru estate owned by somebody called Jonathan Malthus, who's very well known for having created the garagiste estate Le Dôme. But then there are the wines produced by the Darquet family, who have Chateau Teyssier, which actually itself is in Puissegin-Saint-Emilion. So they make both a Puissegin-Saint-Emilion and a Montagne Saint-Emilion under the Chateau Teyssier name. There's no relation to the Saint-Emilion Grand Cru whatsoever. So just to talk briefly about Montagne Saint-Emilion, to the north of Saint-Emilion itself there are 4 satellite appellations that add the name Saint-Emilion to their appellation name. So you have Montagne Saint-Emilion, Puissegin-Saint-Emilion, and then also Saint-Georges-Saint-Emilion and Lussac-Saint-Emilion. Now these wines tend to offer stylistic similarities to the wines of Saint-Emilion, but in general their quality is not as high. Their prices won't be as high, so there isn't quite the same level of investment that goes into these estates. So currently this particular Chateau Teyssier is managed by Anton Darquet, and he's the 4th generation of his family to run the estate, and he's been joined by his cousin Thomas Durand Teyssier, who has taken on the role of technical director here. As you would find with most Saint-Emilion estates, the majority of the vineyards here are planted to Merlot. So I believe the planting is about 90% Merlot to 10% Cabernet Franc, and they do have plans to increase over the next couple of years the amount of Cabernet Franc in the vineyards to about 15%, just to give a little bit more elegance and freshness to the wines. The estate has worked with some very high-profile wine consultants. Originally they had Michel Rolland, famous Saint-Emilion oenologue, working for them. Currently, and since 2014, another prominent consultant, Stéphane de Renoncourt, has been working with the estate, and part of their current plans is they're moving increasingly towards sustainable and organic farming. In the winery, Thomas has the vat room set up so that all the individual plots can be vinified and kept separate, giving them much greater blending options than had previously been the case at the stage of the wine's assemblage. The wines are oak aged, but in general new oak is used sparingly. 70% of the wine will be aged in French oak, and that's a combination of both 225 litre and 400 litre barrels, with aging lasting somewhere between 10 and 14 months. However, 30% of the wine is kept in tank, and that provides a much fresher fruit element to the final blend. The cellar is laid out in such a way that musts and wines are moved by gravity wherever possible to avoid pumping as much as they can. The final blend of this wine, according to the back label, is 95% of Merlot with 5% of, they say, Cabernet, so I'm assuming that's Cabernet Franc, as there's no note of any Cabernet Sauvignon in their vineyard. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? See what we make of it. Colour-wise, seems quite deep and dark. It's not quite opaque, but it doesn't seem to be losing very much colour to the rim. It still has that sort of ruby red note with a relatively youthful, heading towards sort of purple note on the rim. The wine is 14.5% alcohol. That's not particularly surprising, given that 2018 is quite a warm vintage and that the wine is predominantly Merlot. As I'm swirling this, there are quite obvious tears forming on the side of the glass there, so that's suggesting a certain amount of weightiness there. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? Smelling that, there's a rich, ripe fruit. There's a dark plum richness there. But then there's a sort of a chocolatey, vanilla-y core to the fruit there. Sort of a slightly smoothing note. There might also be a touch of tobacco leaf as well. Just providing a sort of a slightly savoury element there, slightly lifted notes. So let's have a taste, shall we? The palate has good acidity. There's plentiful tannins. They're relatively fine. There is a sort of a slightly earthy texture to the wine. And some of that is texture, but some of that is actually sort of flavour notes. There's a slightly savoury note. The wine is medium to full-bodied. The alcohol is certainly giving some richness. There's plenty of ripeness. It's that dark black plum fruit coming through again. The wines are fairly simple. The fruit is to the fore. It's not allowing the oak to really show through. The oak is just sort of pulling back the fruit a little from stopping it being too juicy and primary from that point of view. Are just hints of cedar, but that's sitting behind this sort of dark plum, almost sort of rich licoricey note. There are hints of chocolatiness, touches of more sort of bitter coffee sort of notes and that sort of thing. It's not a particularly complex palate. It's warm, it's ripe, and it's rich. There's reasonable freshness. The finish is of medium length, and it's warm and ripe and rounded. The finish again, that fairly ripe black fruit, but the fruit nature hasn't changed enormously. I mean, the acidity and the concentration of the wine would suggest that this would not be a problem to age for 5 or 6 years. One would hope it would gain a little more complexity. I mean, currently this is very straightforward 4-square wine with relatively firm tannin. I think it's an enjoyable drink. The quality perhaps lacks the finesse that you get with just average level Saint Emilions. It's presenting pleasant drinking in a classic Bordeaux style. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting. If you have enjoyed it, do please press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you know people you think might be interested, do please feel free to share it with them. Do consider signing up and following us on YouTube. That would be fantastic to have your support. If you have any comments or feedback that you'd like to make about the wines, our tastings, or anything else related to that, do please leave them in the comments box below. We'd love to hear what you think. Most importantly, however, I do hope you'll take the time to come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.